Cuts are made, decisions are weighed, and lines are laid as the final position battles are heating up. Who are still in the battles? What are the battles? And who has just lost their opportunity? All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As mentioned on today's episode, some lines were laid out today as there were some cuts made by the Edmonton Oilers. They reduced their camp roster by 2, and they also have 2 players on waivers as well. Today, we will talk about that a little later on today as well. Also, on today's episode, the final position battles in camp. Who are still in the battle, or who is still in the battle, and who really, where are all the battles as well? There are battles still going on for the Edmonton Oilers, and a lot of players still fighting for a little amount of space as well. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcasts. Where we are going to start off today is with the Edmonton Oilers lines. Yes, last night, the Edmonton Oilers did have a game in Abbotsford against the Vancouver Canucks, as it didn't go the Edmonton Oilers' way on the score sheet. A lot to kind of talk about from that game in some senses. But yes, a 5-4 loss for the Edmonton Oilers last night. Connor McDavid, that's a new one. Connor McDavid, is scored a beautiful goal last night to start the scoring off for the Oilers. They were down 1-0 at the time. Unfortunately, they were down 1-0 because been awful by Philip Broberg. Kind of cost that goal there. Not a fantastic effort by him. We'll talk about that more a little later. Markus Niemelainen also getting on the score sheet, not once, but twice for the Edmonton Oilers. 2 assists for him last night. Also getting an assist for the Edmonton Oilers, Jake Virtanen, his second as an Edmonton Oiler in the preseason. And as well, James Hamblin with a goal for the Edmonton Oilers. Also scoring for the Oilers, Zach Hyman and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Now, today, the Edmonton Oilers had some different line looks for practice in skate, really, for the Oilers, but some interesting combinations. First of all, I will read off the names of the lines, but there are some placeholders in the top 2 lines, so when you hear those names, don't go, oh, what's going on? I will explain a little later on why some players were not in practice today. The first line for the Edmonton Oilers at practice this afternoon, Evander Kane skating along with Connor McDavid and Derek Ryan. Now, Derek Ryan is skating in the place for Kailer Yamamoto. We'll talk about why he is out in just a second. On the second line, Dylan Holloway getting more reps on the second line wing for the Edmonton Oilers. He was alongside James Hamblin and Zach Hyman. Now, James Hamblin was in the place for Leon Draisaitl today, another player which we will get to in a little bit as to why he was missing practice. No, it doesn't have to do, at least publicly, with his ankle, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Third line of Ryan McLeod, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Jesse Puljujärvi. And the fourth line of Brad Malone, Devin Shore, and Matthias Yanmark. On defense, Darnell Nurse starts off with Cody Ceci. I think we all knew that was going to happen. Brett Kulak was skating along with Evan Bouchard, but also taking reps with Evan Bouchard was Markus Niemelainen. In fact, most of the sheets had Niemelainen as, I don't want to say the key guy going in with Bouchard, but mostly kind of the noteworthy guy taking those reps with Bouchard. To me, that kind of represents potentially the reps as a seventh defenseman for a guy who's going to be coming in at least normally, because that is a pairing that will happen if the Edmonton Oilers do keep 11-7, or if they do have 7 defensemen in general on their blue line. I wouldn't be surprised to see Niemelainen and Bouchard at some point as well. Also, the third pairing for the Edmonton Oilers, Ryan Murray and Tyson Barrie. And the fourth pairing for the Oilers today, Philip Broberg skating alongside Jason Demers. Now, Philip Broberg, he had an awful effort on the goal for the Vancouver Canucks last night. Not a fantastic game for him once again, which isn't a good thing to say when it comes to a prospect who's trying to make the team, who was supposed to make the team, and is getting outplayed by other guys in the organization. Also, before we kind of elaborate more on that Niemelainen and Broberg thing, not skating today, Leon Draisaitl was given a personal day from Jay Woodcroft, or per Jay Woodcroft, I should say. Kyler Yamamoto is a little banged up, so took the day off, or the skate off today. Tyler Benson with a lower body injury. Sounds like he is still week to week. He was seen skating with a brace on, or not skating, walking out of the arena today with a knee brace on. So once again, sounding more a little week to week for Tyler Benson there. Warren Fogle also not skating today. He was kept off the ice, and so was Dimitri Samarucov. Both guys were, what has been reported, kept off the ice. Not exactly sure the reason there, but they just were. Now, let's get back to the Broberg and Niemelainen deal, where this is a sign that Philip Broberg isn't exactly in favor over, well, mostly Marcus Niemelainen. But this is not the spot that Philip Broberg thought he would be, the Edmonton Oilers organization. Because realistically, those first top 3 really pairings with Niemelainen taking reps next to Evan Bouchard looks like basically the group that would be in the NHL. Darnell Nurse, Cody Ceci, Brett Kulak, Evan Bouchard, Ryan Murray, and Tyson Barrie. Now, that is the group that, if they are allowing a 7th defenseman to take reps in, that is where you want to be. Not skating alongside the guy with a PTO in Jason Demers. This doesn't bode well for Philip Broberg. Another 2 assists last night for Marcus Niemelainen. Another big physical presence for him again as well last night. He's getting outplayed. Broberg is. Marcus Niemelainen is outplaying Philip Broberg, and this was the way that we all said it was going to happen. It was Philip Broberg's spot until he lost it. Well, guess what? He's losing it. He's losing it. But we will talk more about some of the other battles as well, and elaborate more on who just is in that battle with Philip Broberg, because there's also another name that I didn't really mention who is still in that battle for that 7th, 6th defenseman, final defenseman spot for the Edmonton Oilers. We will talk about that in just a second. But first, I want to tell you more about our partners over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your football betting this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for your sport wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your games and events, including MLB, NBA, NHL, MMA, boxing, UFC, golf. Guys, MLB playoffs, the postseason is right around the corner. I know most of you are probably Blue Jays fans, I'm a pseudo Blue Jays fan since I'm a Canadian baseball, but I am a Dodgers fan. So I'm not saying, but maybe take a look at that fantastic team they have over there. Actually, a baseball team that has a bullpen. Shout out Toronto Blue Jays. Head to the betonline.net to use your mobile device, to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. I reach over for my notes for the Edmonton Oilers' final battles for the rosters. The Edmonton Oilers have really two positions, well, 4 to 5 really realistically to fill, but 2 roles to be filled, essentially. The first one being the fourth line, as basically the top 9 is set, but the bottom 3 players, fourth line, is really up for. I do say this is kind of our preseason stock market update almost for today for the Edmonton Oilers. But we're going to go by position, and it's not necessarily based off just last night's game, but over the entire preseason. The first player fighting for the fourth line spot, I wouldn't really say fighting. He was the one player that almost was a constant no matter what, and that is Derek Ryan. He's played very solid in the preseason. Did take a couple of tough penalties in the preseason as well, but for the most part, playing his part, playing what he needs to do, doing what he needs to do, but also, again, just really setting a precedent for those other players fighting for the fourth line spot to also go, okay, that's how I need to play. Derek Ryan, of course, I think, shoe-in for the Edmonton Oilers. Devin Shore, I have him kind of as he's staying equal terms here. You know what you're going to get out of Devin Shore. He's had, I believe he had a 3-assist game the other day for the Edmonton Oilers, if not at least 2. But it was against the Vancouver Canucks. There we go. When the Edmonton Oilers had the 7-2 victory, 2 of those came on Warren Fogle's goal. But again, I think he just one of those steady Eddie type guys. Devin Shore, believe that maybe he'll probably be maybe a 13th forward, depending on if there's somebody else who can beat him out for that spot. One of those guys is James Hamblin. I have him right now as kind of level just because his last couple of games haven't been as fantastic as the start of the preseason for him, but that start of the preseason and just how well he's played in general with the little things he's done has really been impressive. I think there might be an outside shot of James Hamblin actually making this Edmonton Oilers team at the start of out of camp, I should say. That's how well he's played. The next player, Brad Malone for the Edmonton Oilers, has had a little bit of a quiet exhibition series for the Edmonton Oilers. I wouldn't say he's been poor at all, but just one of those guys. You know what you're getting out of Brad Malone. He's a veteran in the game. Just one of those guys who it will probably be the 13th, 14th, 15th forward as well. I don't think he's done enough to make the team out of camp, especially over like guys like James Hamblin, Tyler Benson as well, who we'll get to a bit. But again, you know what you're getting out of Brad Malone. You're never not going to go, oh man, Brad Malone, really? He's a good teammate to have and a good player to have in your lineup, especially because the Edmonton Oilers miss a lot of or don't have a lot of what Brad Malone brings. Experience, grit, I don't want to say skill, but he goes and gets it done. He's a very impressive little hockey player. Warren Fogle, as mentioned as well, one of those players who is battling for a bottom 6 spot more or less than a bottom 3 spot. The interesting thing here is Warren Fogle's had a very good preseason. The Edmonton Oilers are in salary cap issue. If there are other players who are battling for the same spot as Warren Fogle who are being just as productive and are doing all the right things that Jay Woodcroft and the Edmonton Oilers coaching staff want them to do, then maybe there becomes a market for Warren Fogle again. Maybe. Then if you do, you can also clear up that space and have more of those players that you're going, man, our hands are tied to each other. If Warren Fogle could Warren Fogle have played so well that the Edmonton Oilers could trade him for cap relief? Obviously, as well, he's also played well enough to sit there and go, I'm okay with having Warren Fogle in my lineup come day one. So there's the in-between. Yes, you can also move him and get cap space, or you could just keep the player who's been playing well for your team and just live off that. But if the Edmonton Oilers want cap space, that would be an easy way to do it. Next player, Matthias Yanmark. Not too much to say about him. Guy who goes out there and does basically everything he's told to and does it well. Does all the small things basically pretty well. Had a couple lapses, but here and there. Matthias Yanmark, I think, ever since the Oilers signed him, was etched into that fourth line. So we're going to leave that untouched. We're going to leave him there. I think the final player fighting for the fourth line spot for the Edmonton Oilers and a bottom six spot after the cuts today really is now the final player fighting for this spot. And that is Tyler Benson. Yes, Tyler Benson. I'm going to say it. You know what? I think this is the best camp that he's had. Fortunately, did get injured. He is out week to week. What does that mean for him? What does that mean for the Oilers? Because again, now if he starts on the IR, well, now that complicates things for the salary cap even more. Who goes up? Who goes down? Who's on waivers? Who gets moved? Who's on the team? His injury has now caused a little bit of a, now what? Because he played pretty well so far to make those decisions difficult for the Edmonton Oilers. Now I pose the question of, now what? Is he good enough to be on that fourth line? Did he play well enough to play on that fourth line? Is he going to be healthy enough for day one, for when you need to make your rosters, that you can have that salary cap relief that you wanted so much heading into the season? That's where things start to get complicated on the fourth line for the Edmonton Oilers, but I think Tyler Benson has played well enough to fight for that fourth line spot once again. Now, the other battle for the Edmonton Oilers is for that final defenseman spot, really. I have it as a 6/7th defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers because we're not really sure how the Edmonton Oilers are going to deploy themselves this year. Seems like the Edmonton Oilers are very happy with Ryan Murray. He's been kind of that steady guy, almost like the Chris Russell type guy for the Edmonton Oilers. Not going to play every game, but when you do put him in there, you know what you're going to get. You're good with it. It all comes down to Philip Broberg's spot. Philip Broberg not been having a good camp. Everybody came in here with the same expectations for him, expected him to be special, be ready for the NHL. He put on, 12, 25 between, two numbers with TWs in them. Either way, he put on a lot of weight heading into this preseason. Looks like he's still trying to figure out his. Last night, he got outmanned by a guy who is significantly smaller than him in Nils Höglander. Significant. Especially with all that added weight. Then you go and see that Markus Niemelainen has 2 assists, 5 more hits again. He has had at least 5 hits in every game he's played in the preseason, which is something that Philip Broberg still hasn't brought to his. Is it part of his game? Maybe, maybe not. But that's another dimension that Marcus Niemelainen brings over Philip Broberg. I forget who it was who commented, but said their nickname for Marcus Niemelainen is Mienalainen. Marcus Mienalainen. I like that because yes, he's 6'6", and you come in and you go, oh, okay, I'm gonna get hit now. Hard. He nailed somebody from behind last night. I forget who it was from the numbers. It was a little bit of a dirty hit, I won't lie. But he stood his own afterwards. He didn't skate off. He didn't go, oh, yeah, whatever. And let's be real, who's going to want to face a 6'6" Finnish giant? That's the look at all of the aspects and situations that we just brought up about Marcus Niemelainen from one play. Can't do that for Philip Broberg. That's the concerning thing. At the same time, then there's also Dimitri Samarucov, who's also been playing pretty decent throughout this preseason. And a lot of people also still have him on the Edmonton Oilers roster come game 1. The other interesting thing is that Samarucov is waiver eligible. The Edmonton Oilers did want to send him down and say, hey, you know what? That's not yet again this year. Obviously, I think he would be up at some point. The Edmonton Oilers would still have to put him on waivers. That begs the question, would the Edmonton Oilers then lose him? Are they willing to put him on waivers? Because we have seen some waiver players get picked up, but we have seen a lot of players where you're going, maybe that guy gets not get picked. Do the Edmonton Oilers take that risk? Especially a risk on a guy who has been engaged in trade conversations for the last 3 years, basically, just to see if the Edmonton Oilers could get another piece. While all those teams that have been like, yeah, we like Samarucov, but we don't want to send that player for him, can now go, now we got Samarucov for free. That's the risk the Edmonton Oilers might make if Dimitri Samarucov can't step it up again. Finally, as well, in that debate, I'm going to throw Jason Demers' name in there. He has been very solid for the Edmonton Oilers back there. A guy who I think people are calling Ryan Murray kind of the Chris Russell. That's fair, but he is much younger than Chris Russell when he was here. I'm saying Jason Demers can be that Chris Russell guy. Just again, that kind of steady Eddie. You know what you're going to get out of him, a stay-at-home kind of guy. A little bit older, so he brings that veteran mentality. I think he has almost 700, if I'm not mistaken, over 700 games. If not, it's between 400 and 700. So I didn't take a look before I said my words, so good for me. But yes, Jason Demers, I think, could be a very solid veteran for the Edmonton Oilers on the back end, especially for guys like Marcus Niemelainen, Philip Broberg, Evan Bouchard as well, could all learn from. Even Darnell Nurse. I think Darnell Nurse can learn from a lot of guys, and that's not questioning his ability, questioning his leadership, questioning his intelligence. I just think that is the best way for a hockey player to continually develop is learn. And that is from, I think the Edmonton Oilers and Darnell Nurse can learn from a guy like Jason Demers, who hasn't had the easiest road, kind of put some grit into them. Kind of similar to Duncan Keith as well for the Oilers. Again, not saying that Jason Demers is Duncan Keith or Jason Demers is Chris Russell, but just similar impact on these players. Now, let's move on into why these players are in those battles, because the Edmonton Oilers did have a couple of cuts today that directly impact those battles. What cuts were they and what do they now mean, as we basically have gone over it? But what does it mean for those players and the next step as well? We will talk about that in just a second. But first, I just want to thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On NHL, where Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world with Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. Now, finally, today we do have some cuts from the Edmonton Oilers. As the first thing from the Edmonton Oilers that came out today was that Calvin Pickard was on waivers for the Edmonton Oilers. He was placed on waivers today with the purpose of assignment back to Bakersfield. Now, I mention that because Calvin Pickard played pretty well in the pre. And I only mention that the Edmonton Oilers lost a goaltender on the waiver wire last year. Everybody just went, are you? Finally, I believe finally, the Edmonton Oilers get that third string goaltender in Anton Forsberg. And it's gone immediately. It was almost like a fleeting dream. You go, oh, there it is. Oh, no, he's gone. And then maybe the Edmonton Oilers got a third string goaltender again, and he's gone. Now, the Edmonton Oilers did then use Stuart Skinner as their third string goaltender, which, shucks, dang it. But yes, a little bit of a PTSD moment here for the Edmonton Oilers because Calvin Pickard played very, very well in the preseason. Hopefully, no one picks him up because I was kind of shaky going into the season with Pickard. Not a fantastic track record in the NHL, at least statistically. I should say statistically because he is a very well-renowned player, I guess, person in the league, but a veteran, I should say. Journeyman. Let's just keep going with all these acts. But yes, Calvin Pickard, I hope clears, I guess, and gets down to. Also placed on waivers today was Slater Cuckoo. The Edmonton Oilers didn't really report on this, but I believe it was from Tony Brar, who also tweeted this. If it wasn't Tony Brar, so excuse me, but I do know that there were a couple of Oilers beat reporters reporting on this as well, that Slater Cuckoo was placed on waivers. Again, I think that this is, this is mostly just a paper transaction for the salary cap. That's why most people didn't really report on it. We do know that Slater Cuckoo is away from the team for personal problems or personal issues to deal with as well. So, yes, just mostly a action. Now, finally, the big cut for the Edmonton Oilers as well, as there isn't waivers for this, but Jake Virtanen has been released from his professional tryout contract. As yes, that is the big player, I guess, in that fourth line battle that is no longer in that fourth line battle. I think a lot of guys like a Tyler Benson, a Jesse Puljujärvi, Warren Fogle can now kind of take a deep breath and go, okay, there's no one now breathing down our backs. I'm not going to lie, Jake Virtanen's last two games were his two best games as an Edmonton Oiler. That's really not saying much because he wasn't fantastic. Did have assists in both games. But other than that, there was no physical intensity from him. He didn't play very well in his own. He didn't really communicate well with players when he had the puck or was looking for a pass or anything like that. And outlet passes, things like that. And at times looked invisible. An AHL-laden roster, which was kind of the detractor, I think, for many people. I think a lot of people just went, okay, I guess we'll give this guy the benefit of the doubt and we'll watch him play and give him a chance. And quite often fell behind guys like Luke Esposito, James Hamblin, Noah Philp, a lot of those guys as well. You just went, yes, he's still here. So, but yes, Jake Virtanen released from his PTO today. Not sure what his future looks like, but we shall see. Big move, right move by the Edmonton there. Either way, let's call it there as the Edmonton Oilers are back in action tomorrow night against the Seattle Kraken right here in Edmonton. Yes, I'm getting that right. No, I am because I'm looking Anyways, let's call it a day there. I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful Thursday. Goodness, it's Friday tomorrow. It's Friday then. It's Saturday. We don't get there until. Either way, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Hey, La Bamba, baby.